Good Monday afternoon. Welcome to a football show here from 440 Sports, brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and, of course, the Kingston Group. My name is Braden Gall. That is Zach Lyons. Welcome to the show. We've got a lot of stuff to discuss today, as we always do, Zach. But if you guys want to get into the comment section, I've already posted links to our draft party, which is coming close to selling out. Okay? So Friday night, I'll tell you some details about a 3-course meal, 5 bourbon, beautiful flight tasting, private off-the-record conversations, of course, brought to you by Sinkers Beverages, and, of course, our big Thursday night draft party as well, which is a little bit rowdier and going to be a lot of fun as well. So we'll give you links to that and explain what's going on there. Look, we've obviously – this is draft season. We talk draft. There's lots of draft, and we're going to cover defensive backs today. We're going to look at some of the targets at corner and safety. We've talked a lot about those names in the first round, some of those names in the second round, but we're going to kind of look at names, and Zach's going to go deep with you guys and give you some options for later on in the draft. I think you guys will know a lot of the names, but want to reiterate some of those. We've already done this with the offensive line, wide receivers, and front seven, so we're going to do it with defensive backs today. But I wanted to have a conversation about Will Levis, and Zach, I know you're sort of like, look, it's draft season, and I get it, it is. There's just some things that have been like bouncing around in my head for a while over the last couple of weeks, listening to all the great shows across the network and reading all the great content from Stacking the Inbox and paulkarski.com. And again, just there's some conventional wisdom that I'm getting concerned, maybe too conventional. Does that make sense? And so yeah. I wanted to raise some questions and have a fun conversation about Will Levis, year 2, expectations, finding answers. What is it going to look like? How do we define success? I know we've used a lot of those phrases before, but I kind of wanted to come at it from a different angle today. So we're going to have a lot of Will Levis conversation here to start the show. But before we do, of course, Sinkers Beverages in East Nashville, #1 liquor store in the city, 3 years running, of course, and they're going to put on a fantastic draft party for you guys on Thursday and Friday nights coming up. Is this like next week?
It's about time. I'm ready.
It's finally here. And maybe that's why I partly needed a break from draft talk to talk about like actual football players who are on the Titans roster currently. But the draft party, of course, the Friday night link is in the show notes, or it's in the comment section. Both the links to the draft party tickets are available on Thursday and Friday night. They are going to be in the YouTube show notes as well. We try to make sure this is super exclusive for just our audience, so we're not out there posting it on Instagram and Twitter. Eventually, we will do that. Stoney, good to see you. Thanks for jumping into the comments. We will see. He's going to be there, of course, on Thursday night. Edley's Barbecue, all you can eat, all you can drink, $40. Every penny goes to charity. And it's at the Track 1 building, which is in Wedgwood, Houston, which is where the Sinkers headquarters is located. It's a gorgeous building. If you've been there before, if you came last year, I assume you have rave reviews about that building. It's such a cool place, centrally located. And you know what? Parking is really genuinely pretty easy. I recommend ride sharing. Well, hey, not every place in Nashville has a parking lot. I would advise ride sharing if you're doing the all you can drink thing. But just come on by. Tickets again, $40 for Thursday night, catered by Edley's. All you can eat, all you can drink by Sinkers. We're going to do a live show. Stoney's going to be there. We're going to have a great time just like we did last year. And then Friday night, $100 a ticket, 3-course meal from Lachlan Table, 5 different bourbon flight. What is that called? It's a bourbon flight, but that's all I need to call it, right? Okay.
You just need to call it bourbon flight.
I know. I keep fucking around with like the number of them. But there's going to be some really good stuff in that list of bourbons, and some special guests, some off the record conversations. We're going to watch the second and third round. Hopefully the Titans have more than one pick on Friday night. We'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Yeah. There you go. Okay, Elliot, good to see you. Of course, I know you're coming out next week, so it's going to be excited to see you. 20 minutes on Levis, 30 minutes on movies and pop culture in general, 10 minutes on appreciation for the sponsors. Yeah, that's about right. That's about right. Stoney wants to talk about movies. All right, Kingston Group as well, buildkg.com. You guys know the deal there. So this Will Levis thing, I think where this came from for me, Zach, was conventional wisdom. And I think I've said it, and I think you've said it. I think we've said it. I think other shows have said it. Lots of smart people have talked about this. Like, look, 2024 is about finding out what you have in Will Levis, learning what he is, defining what he is. Is he the guy that can win this team a Super Bowl? Is he not? I think that's the conventional wisdom. Some people have said that's the top priority for this season. I think you're probably a little bit more on the, I don't want to speak for you, but I think you're probably a little bit more on the, yeah, let's do that. But also maybe there's a chance they could win the division and compete. So I think that's sort of the conventional wisdom of this. And for some reason, I keep thinking like, we're missing something. We're missing something. We're missing something. And I don't know if we're going to learn what we need to learn about Will Levis in 2024. And so it raises a bunch of questions about how to define success. It raises questions about how much runway and leash he has. When I just start that way very broadly before we get into details, do you think that we know definitively by the end of 2024 season, like what Will Levis is, can be, will be? Do you think we have an answer?
Yes. I don't see why you don't. I don't see if the let me put it to you this way. If it's muddled, if the answer is muddled or the waters are muddied or it's unclear, then you have your answer. There are lots and lots of quarterbacks in year two that make a definitive jump. Now, what happens after year two, sometimes it's injury, sometimes it's just an implosion of different levels. But at the end of the day, yeah, James Neeson gets it right. If you don't know, you know. If you do not know what Will Levis is and you're still questioning whether he can be the guy or he's the guy worth building around or he's the guy worth giving a second contract to, however you want to define it, if you don't know the answer, you know the answer. I mean, it's pretty. When you look at the stats of second-year quarterbacks, the ones that kind of are in the similar Will Levis situation, similar starts to a rookie year, similar team building, coach changes, system changes, and all this stuff, a lot of them improve their second year. And so if he does not improve from a statistical standpoint and from what you see him do on the field, I think that's your answer. Like, I don't think quarterback wins don't matter to me. Wins do not matter. That the injuries do matter. I mean, there's certain aspects to look at it because at the end of the day, your team is going to know. I mean, your staff's going to know. I do not understand this logic that, they may not have an answer. Like I said, if there's not clarity, then you have your answer. He has to separate himself.
Could there be clarity? Could they have the answer internally and us still not be asking the right question, which is he good enough to win a Super Bowl? So I think answering the question,
did you ever think Jared Goff was good enough to get to a Super Bowl? Did you ever think that Matt Stafford was good enough to really win a Super Bowl? So, I mean, Stafford maybe, but at the end of the day,
no and yes.
Listen, Joe Burrow is good enough to win a Super Bowl, doesn't mean that he will. Dan Marino is good enough to win a Super Bowl, doesn't mean he will.
Of course.
And listen, I'm not saying that Will Levis is any of those guys, but Will Levis can be Matt Stafford. He could be Jared Goff. He can be, your guys in the 60% can win you Super Bowls. Not really win, you have to build around them, but they are guys that you can invest a second contract in and reap rewards and reap benefits and stuff like that. It's at the end of the day, it's all about, is Will Levis good enough that you foresee over the next year? Because after this year, you have one more year before extension time.
Yep.
Right.
That's the issue.
Whether he's good or bad. So you should know after this year because he is a second round pick. So you have to know.
So I think one of the reasons this keeps coming up is that the window is fairly small and the team still feels far away, although they've done a great job in the offseason of plugging holes. And what I find interesting, you bring up Goff and Stafford. Those are like two of the names that I really actually focused on when I was getting ready for this. And I'll throw a couple of other names out there. There's also a Titans element to all of this, which I think we need to acknowledge shades our judgment sometimes on how to evaluate quarterbacks so we'll get to that in a second. It's funny you mentioned Goff because Goff I thought was I think Jared Goff is one of the most interesting quarterbacks on the planet, just like in general. He gets kind of thrown into the starting lineup. He's obviously different than Will Levis in terms of where he's drafted, but that kind of goes out the window once you're on the field. He goes 0 for 7. More interceptions than touchdowns. Really not that great. He in 2017 and 18, they go 24-7. He has 60 touchdowns. They throw for 8,500 yards, 19 interceptions, and they end up in a Super Bowl. So he's won games. And the 4 ways I would define sort of successful quarterback plays: production, and for Will Levis in particular on year 2, there's statistical production and efficiency. There's leadership and sort of culture and locker room and maturity and just being an adult professional athlete. There's physical development, like, hey, my arm slot got a little more accurate, or my footwork, or I learned reads better, or whatever. And then there's sort of winning at the end of it. If you do all the first 3 things, you sort of end up with a winning player or a winning team. And Goff checked every single box basically in his second and third seasons. And then he was traded with 3 draft picks because he wasn't good enough for them. Now it turns out now he's having this renaissance with Detroit, which makes him utterly fascinating. How about Carson Wentz, MVP candidate, incredible statistical production, was leading the team. They're winning games. They go 11-2. He gets hurt. We know what happens in the playoffs. They eventually win the Super Bowl. And he's like garbage after that. Joe Burrow, you mentioned him. This is a guy who 2 seasons have been lost to injury. The other 2 seasons are completely elite. So we kind of know what he is, but the injuries are a factor. And I'll go back to Mariota just because this is a Titans fan base here. Like before Ryan Tannehill came along and sort of one-upped him in every category, Mariota's 25, 16, and 17, his first 3 years, it's hard to define anything other than that being a successful turnaround from the worst team, one of the worst teams in the NFL, largest franchise win increase, one of the best statistical seasons by a Titans quarterback. And I'm not counting Warren Moon here. I'm talking just Titans, right? Steve McNair is basically the only guy that's better than Marcus Mariota from a numbers perspective up until that point. There was one really good Matt Hasselbeck year. We all know the Vince Young season. There was a Kerry Collins season in there. But like from a 3 or 4 year window, nobody had done really what Marcus had done. And he gets hurt, and Tannehill comes in and steps in. And Tannehill's actually a really fascinating study through all of this as well. Tannehill, double-digit interceptions, never had a winning record for like 9 years. Then he gets traded here. It works. The change of scenery works, and all of a sudden he's doing what Tannehill done, which is, I think he's clearly the second best quarterback in Titans history behind Steve McNair. So ultimately, all of this, it leads me to think that we could see a lot of good stuff from Will Levis. We could see production. We could see leadership. We could see development, and they might win more than 6 games. But I don't know if that's going to definitively tell. Like, do you think that is not muddled at all, or do you think that's clear that it's giving you the answer?
I think what he does gives you the answer. I looked at 6 quarterbacks: Josh Allen, Trevor Lawrence, Ryan Tannehill, Marcus Mariota, Jared Goff, and Derek Carr. Like, to me, those 6 guys are all guys that have similar situations, similar questions coming in to their rookie year, coming out of their rookie year. I think the only one that had a bit of success their rookie year, really Carr and Trevor Lawrence, but we know that Trevor Lawrence had Urban Meyer and double-digit interceptions and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
So I took their stats, and I went from year 1 to year 2. And I did completion percentage, touchdowns, interceptions, average yards per attempt, yards per game, passer rating, EPA, and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, I want to take these averages of these 6 quarterbacks and what they did from year 1 to year 2, because everybody got better in year 2. Everybody got better. And I was like, okay, so what could you, if you took the average growth, what kind of stat line should you expect from Will Levis in a 17-game season? Because you got to play your full 17 games. That's why I did yards per game. And if you're looking at it, he should go from 58.4 completion percentage to 62.6 completion percentage. He should go from 1,800 yards over a 9-game span to should be over 4,000. So like baseline should be 4,000 over a healthy 17 games, because he should be expecting, you should expect a jump with this new offense, with better pass catchers, with a better offensive line coach and a better offensive line. Obviously, this means you have to get the franchise left tackle. But
right.
Your yards per game should go from 200.9 to 243. You should see a 20.9% increase.
It's crazy that 243 is what gets you to 4,000 these days.
Yeah, right.
Just by the way, as a side note.
And so, like, you should see probably, anywhere from 27 to 30 something touchdowns. You should see maybe 7 interceptions versus 4 because you're going to be playing more games and throwing the ball more. And you should see your passer rating jump up. Like, all this stuff is tangible evidence, but all this stuff you just can't luck into. You just don't luck into being a 4,000 yard passer unless you're throwing the ball 600 or 700 times, like whatever Jameis Winston did to get his, 4,000 yards. But for the most part, you don't luck in. You can't just luck into it at any point and do that. And when you got Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, whatever happens at wide receiver, tight end, and left tackle, you got a better center. I think we very much underplay what Lloyd Cushenberry is going to mean for not only just the offensive line in general, but for Will Levis. And you got a better staff on paper, a better staff. This quarterback, Will Levis, is not the handpicked golden child of Brian Callahan. Now, the questions surround whether it's, what block between Ren Carthon that doesn't really matter. Because at the end of the day, if Will Levis does not perform and not take a leap visually on the field every week to week and in the stat box, Brian Callahan's going to go to Miss Amy. He's going to go to Ren Carthon. They're going to have a little powwow and say, look, this guy declined. He didn't get any better. He's, let's just say that, he's just busy partying, going to the Masters or something like that. He's just not as dedicated as we all thought he would be, or he's put in the work. It's just not good enough. Like, the work's not translating. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes you put in the work and it does not translate. This is all stuff you can tangibly see. There is no muddling. What muddies the waters for Will Levis is 3 people on the offensive line get injured and they're out for the season, and then DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley are both out for the season.
Okay, so I agree with you on the injury stat. That sort of like leaves everything it puts it into gray area. And Zach says, it would be hard for, not you, Zach, but our listener, Zach said, It would be hard for Levis to take a leap visually. Dude is already stunning. Yes, heavy QB1 vibes down there at Augusta National. I think, to your point, you kind of laid out numbers that I would consider like a heck of a season. Now, number one, again, Carson Wentz in only like
heck of a season by Titans standards, but by the NFL standards, it's kind of
He had Carson Wentz had 4,000 yards passing in like 11 or in 13 games, and it's fair to say that it wasn't it. That wasn't the thing. And so so let's say it's like 3,600 yards.
But his thing it wasn't because of year 2, right? Like, you're talking about when they exited Carson Wentz at year 2, they thought they had their guy.
Oh, exactly. This is my point.
That's not how you're phrasing the question. Can you know after year 2? Yes. But can other things happen after year 2? Obviously, injuries can happen and all this other stuff. That's for anybody.
Okay,
so
hang on.
Injuries in year 3.
I'm not talking about that's fair, but let's take injuries away. Like, ultimately doing the research on this, what I feel like I've learned, because this is kind of I couldn't really figure out, and you and I were talking over the weekend. Like, I can't really figure out what it is that's causing me to think about this Levis thing and his second year and what it's going to look like now that they've invested in the receivers, and they're probably going to invest in the offensive line. Cushenberry, I agree with you, is a huge factor. Look at the 2 running backs they got back there now. Everybody likes those as a tandem. Like, my issue, the thing about Wentz is sort of the example. Like, they thought they knew, they were wrong. Like, and it wasn't just an injury.
They weren't wrong. It was injuries. That's what derailed his whole season. It was not only he also suffered an injury in 2017. He suffered an injury in 2018, and he never recovered. Marcus Mariota never recovered from breaking his leg on Christmas Eve.
And the nerve injury. I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, there's stuff out of your control. It's not. I think at the end of the day, you want. I view quarterback play, and I think the NFL told us this. You saw Justin Fields, Kenny Pickett, Desmond Ridder, Sam Howell all find new homes. Okay, it's a year-by-year league at the quarterback position. So can you know that, okay, in 2025, 2024 is going to tell me that at least 2025 I got my quarterback? Or is 2024 going to tell you I better go ahead and start looking at quarterbacks? That's what it's going to tell you.
So I
You're
agree.
wanting a long-term solution. I don't think there is long-term solutions.
Maybe
I
you're
mean,
right.
listen, what if CJ Stroud and company, they go take a step backwards, right? In year
But
2.
it doesn't.
Then
I
you're
think.
kind of like, ooh,
But I think
you
this is.
know,
I think this is what I'm trying to maybe get across, and maybe in my head work through, is that it's not linear. You don't just go from like being D level to C level to B level to A level. Sometimes in NFL careers, this fucking wild roller coaster of ups and downs. And we may think we know something about this year that gives us really good information about next year. But if we're talking about what I exactly believe this is about, which is the second contract, we're not far away from them having to make a very large decision. And maybe the dollar figure is the thing that's we're actually negotiating here, right? Like maybe they learn that he's clearly good enough to be given a second contract, but over the next, let's say, 2 years of football, that's when we're going to find out if he's a $40 million a year guy or a $27 million a year guy. And I'm just pulling those numbers out relative to today. But like, if you look at these careers, like they're other than like the ones that are so obvious, Joe Burrow going to a Super Bowl in year 2, Patrick Mahomes doing what he's done. Like I have these debates and discussions, and this is partly why I'm having this problem. Like Jordan Love is still like, I think the diehard Packer fan is just like all in on Jordan Love. They love Jordan Love.
they should be, because he's going to keep on growing, because he's got a good situation, good young receivers. There's just nothing. There's nothing there that says, there's nothing you saw on tape last year that says, man, Jordan Love cannot win in this league. He cannot get us to a Super Bowl. Yeah, I think if you saw that, then you were watching a totally different Jordan Love than I was.
I think
Because I saw Jordan Love, and I saw a guy that's going to continue to grow. Now that he's got a full season behind him, he will continue to grow.
I think that's conventional wisdom, and in most situations, if you're good enough, that's absolutely true, and that's absolutely what's going to happen. But
But if you're going to be pessimistic, then yes, I would agree with you. But I think there's a degree of realism that all teams think they have the guy. They're not going to know they don't have the guy until they know they don't have the guy, right? Like the Giants, I would agree with Chef Rand. That was a weird situation. They went ahead and paid him after one good season, totally erasing the previous seasons. And then what did he do? He went back to be a pumpkin. Jordan Love, right? He's still on a pretty inexpensive contract, right? So if he continues or keeps progressing this year, then you got the guy.
But I don't
got a guy.
but honestly, having watched it, this is why I don't think it's linear. I think with Jordan Love, I can absolutely, without being pessimistic, just realistically say he missed a lot of really wide open throws. He made some rookie decisions, which is, again, part of the learning process. He's not very good outside of the confines of the offense, and maybe you don't have to be. I don't know. But I think based on statistical production and winning and all the other ways you kind of grade out the quarterback, leadership, etc., it's hard for him to get a lot better next year. Like one of the greatest first seasons in the history of statistical production from an NFL player. It's going to be very hard. And I think there's to take it back to Levis and Stroud. I think this is a good comparison. I wouldn't be shocked at all if Will Levis takes a major step forward and CJ Stroud takes a step back, and that doesn't actually dictate where their careers are going. And like, does that make sense? Like, I could see Will Levis, like, what is that? So Dak Prescott is a fascinating one to me. Pretty good right away. Like when he got onto the field with the Cowboys, he's been a pretty good quarterback most of his career. But like, there's all these questions and debates about, can he win this big game in the big moment? And like, is he worth the contract? Is he worth the money? And like, they've been to the playoffs like 5 times. Like, they're pretty good with him. He's a pretty good player, but we still have these conversations. What is Tua? Some of that is based exclusively on injury, but what is Tua? Jalen Hurts gets all kinds of questions about what he is and who he is. And so I think it's good. It's one thing for Brian Callahan to know exactly what Will Levis is in his head. He'll never say that publicly. Like, oh, I think I would love Brian Callahan with some truth serum. And Zach, you're like, look, is he a 20, a 60, or a 20 guy? And Brian Callahan's like, well, he's quarterback number 13. Like, I would love to know exactly where he thinks.
We all know I'm not banking. Here's the thing. You don't have to be 20 to get the second contract. You don't have to be in that top 20%.
Agree.
You don't have to be the top 20% for a team to believe in you. So I think right now you would say that realistically, right now, until we have more information. He's at the bottom of the 60%. You saw some good stuff. You know he's got the intangibles down. You know he's got the leadership. He's got the personality, the drive, the fight. But it all comes down to how can he take that next step statistically, in a lack of a better term. How does he increase his accuracy? Because if he doesn't increase his accuracy, you're not going to see. You're going to know your answer. Like that's just how I am. I think you're going to know your answer. You're going to know. I'll say this. I think this is the best way to put it. You're going to know that he's definitely not the guy, or you're going to know, okay, I think he's on the right path. That's how I kind of view it.
I think this is how I settled on it as well. A really big step forward in progress is awesome and great and enjoyable, but that does not mean we know the final answer on him. And ultimately, I think you're right. Outside of a 3-win season where it is just clear he can't read defenses and he actually goes from 58 to 56% completion percentage. And again, I'm not saying I think this is going to happen, but outside of the two extremes, right, where it's clear that it's not clicking, right? You're Kenny Pickett or whatever. You're just like a big transformer version of Kenny Pickett. Or Joe Burrow, year 2, just clearly understands everything, executes accuracy, and it leads to success, both statistically and on the field. I think those are extremely rare, and I don't think you see them very often, and I don't think you're going to get that this year. And ultimately, what I think, so maybe you're right. Maybe it's like, if the answer is no, clearly no, we're all going to know. And I think that's probably fair. But if the answer is maybe, which I think there's a better chance that at the end of 17 games, the answer is still going to be like, yeah, maybe, probably. I think he's got a lot of potential.
You may have to take year 3 to figure out, is Will Levis going to revert back to what he was in 2023? He shouldn't, right? Because he's going to have more time. He's going to have better weapons. You should be expecting a considerable leap in production-wise, in what he's able to do, what he's able to read. The plays are going to be better. You should expect the leap. If you do not get a leap, a tangible leap, you know your answer. I don't care about the wins. He can be a 4,000-yard passer, or let's say 36. He can be a 3,800-yard passer, and it not amount to a double-digit win season. It could amount to still a losing record season, because at the end of the day, there's defenses got to play.
Yeah.
And you just so much going on.
Right.
So, to me, it's like, if I see a considerable jump, does that mean 100% sure the Titans are winning a Super Bowl with Will Levis? No. Does that mean that year 3 is you feel comfortable passing on a quarterback in the draft because you got enough out of Will Levis that that because they're going to know more than we are going to know.
Exactly.
We're going to be living in the land of projection and speculation. Yep. They're going to know behind the scenes. Okay, we saw what he did behind the scenes. We saw how we surrounded him with talent. We saw that he put in the work, and it all yielded results from his standpoint. So we know that in the next year, we're going to have more continuity, right? The Colts will still be here. I'll still be here, but this is Brian Callahan speaking. And then we're going to have even more money to spend. We're going to have another draft. We're good to go. We're still going to be speculating, but they're
right.
going to be making moves that they think that Will Levis is the guy. And I think that ultimately is how you got to kind of view it. We're speculating, hypothesizing, poking holes in the game.
Right.
That doesn't mean that he can't regress in year 3.
Right.
That's entirely possible.
Which also has no direct correlation to what he does in year 4, 5, and 6. Like they're just,
it does, because they're not going to, if he regresses in year 3, they're done with him.
Well, but again, I think ultimately if the question is, they need to have an answer. I really don't think they're going to have a clear answer. And maybe you're right. They'll know a lot more. We're going to be in the, I don't know if he can win us a Super Bowl debate, which is this cul-de-sac of like intellectual stupidity sometimes in sports media, where we just end up round and around and around. Like, is Joe Flacco elite? Like that stupid ass conversation. That's what it turns into. And I know that's what it turns into from the outsider's perspective in the media and with the fans. And I agree. They have far more information. And to me, there's only like one big decision that dictates that. Second contract. So even if he regresses in year 3, they still might believe in him. And they might go, okay, that was a function of X, Y, or Z. And this ultimately gets to our point about the way they're surrounding him. Like Cushenberry, great step forward. Ridley, but they lose Hopkins next year. So is it clear that they're going to have a better receiving core next year? Well, we don't know. If they go draft Malik Neighbors or Roman Dunze, the answer should absolutely be yes. But what about the offensive line? That's a huge factor in Joe Burrow's health right now and projecting what Joe Burrow's been for Cincinnati. I just don't think I think if you're asking me for a prediction, my prediction on Will Levis is that absolutely he's going to end up in the top half of that 60%, which makes him about like quarterback like 8 to 14 in the NFL, give or take, whatever, depending on how good he could or couldn't get to. But I think he's Matt Stafford, honestly, is what I think he is eventually.
I wanted to use Matt Stafford's stat. I forgot in his second year he got injured, and then his third year he took a considerable leap. But how much of that is just being in your third year? You know what I'm saying? Like, it was really hard to use Matt Stafford for I wanted to desperately.
This was first of all, just going back and looking at Stafford's numbers are absurd. 7 consecutive seasons with 4,000 yards passing.
And he wasn't the issue, right?
No,
I mean, like,
no.
A dysfunctional organization, but they knew, but they eventually just gave up on him for Jared Goff, and it worked and didn't work, right?
And a bunch of draft picks. So in those 7 years, 7 straight 4,000-yard passing seasons, 4 winning seasons, and they went to the playoffs 3 times with the Lions organization. And then they trade him. Now, I don't blame them for trading him and him being a Super Bowl caliber quarterback, because you got a 3rd and 2 firsts, which is why Detroit's good now. And it's also because they saw more out of Jared Goff than maybe the Rams did. Like that is one of the most we're going to look back 20 years from now on Goff and Stafford's career and be like, what the fuck? So I think ultimately my answer is the most likely outcome of the 2024 season for Will Levis is that we really don't have a clear answer. They will have a clear answer on second contract or not, and if that will be the deciding factor on whether or not they are in or out, obviously. But I think we're going to come out of this season. I wrote down some numbers just randomly here to project his season. 3,600 yards, 24 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 8-9 record, completion percentage 60%. Clearly a step forward, mild progress.
Not enough to get near I think that is still bottom of the 60.
And I don't necessarily disagree with your assessment of those numbers and that performance, but it's clear progress. And it doesn't mean that there's not a huge leap coming in year 3 or a major shit down your leg in year 3. Like I think we have to be prepared. And this is ultimately, I think, why I was thinking about this.
Okay, so can I say something real quick? You read those stats again.
3,600. You can move them around a little bit if you want. 3,600 yards passing, 24 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 60% completion percentage. But like, he does some good things in some good moments, like he did in the Miami game, and they go 8-9, and he helps the team win more games.
Well, here's the thing: is that you gave him like 1.6 completion percentage. That's better, but that's not good. You gave him, about what? Maybe 10 yards per game more than what he got last year. Again, not good. To me, that lets me know that, okay, well, we just built around you. And you stayed healthy, and you still couldn't beat out Matt Hasselbeck. That's what it tells me. Over 17 games.
I mean,
so
when you put it that,
when you put it good to me.
When you put it that way.
Now, listen, if especially the interceptions, those interceptions numbers really jumped up. But here's my thing: if that's over 13 games, okay, I can live with that over 13 games. But if you're talking, that's a stat line for a full 17 game season, I'm good. I'm good on him.
You think that you can definitively know, because again, it's the numbers are so easy for us on a talk show to like bring up. Yeah. I think so much more of it is about when does he make the right decisions, in what situations is he making the right decisions. But he's obviously not
in your scenario. He's 60% completion percentage, and he has more interceptions than he did last year. Like, that's not that to me lets me know that he's just never going to be the top half of the 60. And that's what you're ultimately needing at a bare minimum.
I think Bo, he says, are we talking about Hasselbeck now or in his prime? I think he's talking about the season that Matt Hasselbeck has the actual like modern passing record outside of Steve McNair, which again, if you don't know that, I did not actually officially know that like every one of those seasons, it's like Matt Hasselbeck actually has the most yards,
Yeah.
which is fascinating to me. But again, like Vince Young did some things in that one season where we were like, oh my God. And then it obviously his commitment to the game and his professionalism and his adult maturity took its course and it ruined him. I just think that I am fully prepared to be having what exactly is Will Levis's upside and conversation. I think all of next offseason.
If we're having that, then I think we know our answer. Like I think the discussion is here's the thing. If I guess I kind of see what you're saying in the sense of, is he good enough to win a Super Bowl? Okay, you may not have that answer next year by himself, because I mean that's ultimately what you're kind of wanting. You're wanting the guy that can carry the team. Is he the truck or the trailer, right? So I get what you're saying, but if we're discussing, I think up to a certain point, what he is and what he can be, I think you're just kind of like, as far as
I get what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of
we're both kind of disagreeing and agreeing at the same time. Because I do agree. I think if you were saying like, hey, Braden, bet a bunch of money on the prediction here, I think Calvin Ridley, improved offensive line play, improved offensive scheme from Brian Callahan, fresh start for a lot of players in that receiving core.
And I will say this is with Joe Alt or Olu Fashanu at left tackle in mind when I'm discussing like what I expect or what we need to see. If they're rolling out Andres Pete out there and maybe Talisi Fuaga over on the right side, I'm a little bit I'll give a little bit more lenience to what I expect. But this is with an idea that the draft is a really good benefit for Will Levis.
I think, and maybe again, there's a very good chance that he is similar to what he was last year or slightly better. In part because of his own personal development, in part because of his own experience. And again, I don't know. I think he's older than Jordan Love. Don't quote me on that. But Jordan Love, this is his 4th season in the NFL. Like this is a guy who's been in practice for a long time and was able to do that. And they had a ton of weapons and all kinds of young talent around him.
Jordan Love is 25, so I think that's the same.
I think they're the same age roughly. But again, 4 years in the NFL versus
he's
1.
about to turn 25. Will Levis is about to turn 25.
Okay. So even with that age, like that means that you've got to make a decision about a contract probably in 2 full seasons from now. I don't know if you know officially if he's a Super Bowl champion quarterback. I think you know if he's in the top that top tier, that top 20%, that top 6 to 8 players that are Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson. I think I might even argue I think I already know he's not in that group. But can he be again a Matt Stafford who is physically, from a talent standpoint, at the top of that 60%, that middle 60%, then it's so dependent on other things. I think Matt Stafford and Ryan Tannehill is like his floor and his ceiling. And I think we're not going to know what that is for a while.
Can we be honest with something? If that is floor and his ceiling, then you can win a Super. Then you're saying you can win a Super Bowl. With Will. But to me, his floor is way lower than that. Now, maybe in your words, that's a realistic, but Will Levis's floor is like Jameis Winston. Like it's a bad floor because he could throw. He's a turnover machine. He could take a lot of sacks, and that can really derail it quickly.
I follow you because Winston. That's bad. but
yeah.
I see what you're saying though. Like, hey, I'm a superhero. I think I can throw it into any window, but my inaccuracy problems causes me to create some turnovers. And even though
my leadership style's a lot more quirky than what people, because like you gotta remember, everybody said Jameis Winston, pro style offense at Florida State. And he's a great leader. And then all of a sudden he's starting to eat W's and all this kind of stuff. And like if Will Levis starts getting really corny, turns into a cornball as far as leadership, it's gonna get me worried. Get me worried right there. I don't think that's the case. I just want everybody to know I do not think that's the case. But when you talk about the abilities on the field, Will Levis can easily be end up being Jameis Winston at this level. I mean,
I
it
think
can happen.
Corky's a really good word for Will Levis because I don't think the immaturity factor of Winston is the problem here. I think he's got it. I think the competitive spirit and like the he's too smart, man. Like you don't have 2 college degrees from like, you know what I mean? Like he comes from like a family of business people. Like he understands PR and branding, and he might be a little quirky and a little intense, but I think one of the things and this maybe is ultimately, I think what he is the 2 most important things, and this maybe gets to our conversation about winning, which you don't love, and maybe I'm devaluing the statistical production, like the accuracy, for example. I think the 2 things, leadership and like physical development of his skills to like to really hone them to be like Jordan Love is a perfect example. Jordan Love throws off his back foot all the fucking time. It drives me crazy. It drives me crazy. But I see Will Levis do a lot of that too. But Aaron Rodgers does that. Patrick Mahomes does that. The great ones do that. But what they do first is they perfect their craft first. And then they kind of prove to everybody, oh, I don't actually have to be on the ground throwing the football. I can do it however the fuck I want because I'm so good. They
get out there and throw, for the most part. Most of these people throw with the receivers that are starting on their team. Stop going out and working out with Mason Kinsey. That's my first piece of advice for Will Levis.
Don't hate on Mason.
There is no reason that you should be posting videos of you working out with Mason Kinsey. Show other people. Have other people show up. Fly them in. Do not. Because Mason Kinsey's not playing on Sundays. I hate to break it to Will. Kinsey's not playing on Sunday, so what fucking good is it?
Yeah. I think there's a Will Levis, and you guys might be tired of like a quarterback conversation like this. I just thought we've had a lot of draft talk. I wanted to take a break and kind of get into some Will Levis stuff. Will Levis is the most important professional athlete in like the state of Tennessee, outside of maybe Ja Morant. And I would argue football makes the NBA look like nothing, from like a popularity standpoint, TV ratings. And what happens with him is going to be scrutinized by everybody. Every single thing he does is going to be scrutinized. People are going to love what he does. People are going to hate what he does sometimes. And I think we just need to take a step back and be smart about the fact that there's a really good chance that he's going to have some really good moments. He's going to have a couple questionable moments. He probably is going to get better because the receiving core and the coach is better at offense. And that at the end of the year, we're still going to be going like, well, I think he's clearly our starting quarterback. I think he absolutely should be the guy, but I don't know if can win us a Super Bowl or not. And that's not I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't say that like it's a negative. I say that like, I just don't think we're going to have clarity as much as we want unless one of the 2 extreme situations happen, which is Will Levis takes him to the fucking Super Bowl. Amen, sister. Or they are the first pick in the draft again. And because it's so bad and it's Jameis Winston and whatever you said. So unless those 2 things happen,
I think there's a lot of, if this was the scale, if you're watching on YouTube, if the scale is one right here, this is on one hand, you have terrible disaster, elite season. On the other hand, I think, and this is the ring finger, the one with the ring is our terrible disaster. I think there's a greater, if you are in here in this range, which is like about half, you know your answer. That's where I'm at.
Okay.
And that's between the halfway point of being good and terrible.
And
you have your answer.
And you know what's funny? Like this is a perfect analogy now because I think what's going to happen, he's going to be like 56%. he's going to be just
I'm out.
No, I mean he's going to be just he's going to be just over the line.
You think he's going to be
like he'll be just good enough to be out of the window that you're making. You see what I'm saying? Like you're putting the window as like this is the answer, it means bad. And I think he's going to be just good enough to be out of that department. And that's kind of where I'm at, but I don't think that gives us a clear answer. But anyway, we do appreciate you guys joining us on this NFL draft detour. Now, if you'd like to come to the party, check out the show notes in the YouTube page or in, of course, the podcast app, wherever you get our notes. A football show is everywhere you get your podcasts and on YouTube. If you want to give us a little subscription, click that up button, that like button. That helps people find us, so we really do appreciate it. Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group are 2 great sponsors, so make sure you please go support those good businesses. StackingTheInbox.com, where you can find Zach's scribings, as well as PaulKarski.com and you've got all the other great shows across the 440 Sports Network covering your Tennessee
Getting
Titans.
close to being done with our draft guide.
It's one of those events
Only
where
draft guide that's going to have a Drake Stoops profile. I can guarantee you that.
It's one of those events where I cannot wait for it to happen, but I'm also like kind of tired of talking about it. So I'm like, I'm equal parts excited and like, all right, I can't wait to see him on the practice field, whoever the fuck they draft. Like I'm excited about that. All right. So tickets are available, $40. Every penny goes to charity. Our Kids Foundation is who benefits from this. We have 4 tickets left, I think, maybe 3 left on Friday night. There's only a limited number of seats available for that event. 3-course meal, Lachlan table, going to be a ton of fun. Friday night, Edley's, all you can eat, all you can drink, $40. Every penny of both of those events, we don't take a single penny of it. All of that goes directly to help the children of Middle Tennessee. So please buy those tickets. They are linked in the show notes, both on YouTube and on the podcast feed. And we really do appreciate it. Let's dive in. Last 15 minutes here. Let's dive into some targets at corner. I know we had some. Is it recent news? Did the Terrion Arnold news break recently here?
It just happened while we were talking about Will Levis.
So anything that you observe, Zach, from Terrion Arnold, of course, corner out of Alabama. I could argue he's the second best corner out of Alabama, but I think he's a good player. That he's going to get
I think you can make that argument.
I think he's going to get a 30 visit. He got a 30 visit, right? It's not a top. Yeah. We don't call it that anymore. It's a 30 visit. What else do you make of who's been visiting? Anything changed from some of the names you've seen added to that list?
No, because I mean, really the only name that we saw, Devontae Walker, he's got a virtual meeting. Josh Proctor, also a virtual meeting. We had 3 confirmed local visits: Cole Spencer, Gabe Judy Lally, and Jalen Mahoney, all undrafted free agent kind of guys. I think the last time we talked, I don't know if Kool-Aid McKinstry was on the list last week. Jordan Morgan was also added, and Terrion Arnold was added today. But all of these guys that they're doing their due diligence on scream trade back. Like that is what they are. Whether you're talking about, J.C. Latham, Tyler Guyton, maybe even Joe Alt. If he's still there at 7, you could trade back to 10 and, probably still get Joe Alt. Who knows? Kool-Aid McKinstry, Terrion Arnold, Jordan Morgan. I mean, all these guys scream trade back, and they are up to now 6 cornerbacks.
Mm-hmm.
And 5 of the 6. No, I don't know what Isaiah Johnson counts as. I think he's a safety. Yeah.
Only one of them would be considered a first-round pick, though, in Arnold, right?
McKinstry. I
mean, I like him, but I saw
he's going to go in the first. I'd be pretty surprised if he didn't go in the first.
Okay. I mean, I kind of agree. I kind of agree with you.
And I think that's just because of the nature of the position, especially. And I don't like Nate Wiggins. So if I'm a team, I think I'd rather have Kool-Aid McKinstry than Nate Wiggins. The medicals will be real big, but from everything that we've heard, pretty glowing reports. But we're talking about defensive backs. Here are your 30 visits: Chris Abrams-Drain, Jarvis Brownlee Jr., Kalen Carson, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Terrion Arnold. And then I must have added these other 2 guys on here. And then I think Gabe Judy Lally was a cornerback for a local. So there's your 6 there. So
that leads
5
us into...
of them are guys that are firmly within drafting range of anywhere from the late half of the first round all the way into day 3.
Yeah. So this leads us right into targeting players. There's a lot of names you've heard us say that we've talked about. We could do safeties probably real fast first if you want to do that. I outside of Tyler Newbin being available at 38, Cooper DeJean, I think, is a guy you play at all the different positions. You can play him at all the different positions and I think you draft him to play corner, slot, safety, linebacker. Like you draft him to play everything. And so outside of those 2 guys,
if you're a predominantly zone coverage team, he's going to be fantastic for you.
I agree. If outside of those 2 guys in that, like, let's say 25 to 40 range, you trade way back in the first round or use your second round pick. Outside of those 2 guys, I'm not sure there's a name I'm considering in the first 2 rounds, right?
And you said McKinstry and
No, just safety. Just talking safety.
oh, safety. Sorry. Give me 1 second.
Because I think we could do safety. I think we could do safety real fast.
And you said Nubin and
DeJean is the only other guy.
Nubin and Cooper DeJean.
Those are the only two I'm counting.
I could almost be talked into, and this is going to sound weird. I could almost be talked into one of the Utah safeties. Not really. No, I'm with you. No, move on.
I like it.
I changed my mind.
To me, the safety conversation really, actually, outside of those two names, is like I like Javon Bullard at 106. You know, like if there's somebody you really like at 106, those are the names that I like. And if Cole Bishop is the name that you really like and he's there at 106, then great. Let's think about that. That's a consideration. That's a target. Is there a chance that those guys aren't there at 106? Probably. So that's sort of where I started.
A lot of people have been shooting Jaden Hicks up their board. I mean, he's all right, but I don't think I'm putting him up there with Nubin and Cooper DeJean.
No.
I like Dadrian Taylor Dimison. I tell you a guy that you could. There's two guys that I think that are kind of flying under the radar right now that I would think the Tennessee Titans could do something with, and I think that Ryan Watts, if you want to take the Texas cornerback and move him to safety, and Katana Oladepo, I think he has the production that you're looking for. He has the size, the athleticism that you look for, and you put him next to Amani Hooker. That's a pretty good duo, in my opinion. But those are guys that you can get likely in the 6th or 7th round. I mean, this class is filled with day 3 guys you could take a chance on, and because safety's kind of unimportant, if you brought in Marcus May and one of these guys, then your safety room looks pretty dang good.
I like, and I've said this name a bunch on the show, but this is more like 5th, 6th, 7th round. I like Jalen Simpson out of Auburn a lot of athleticism.
Yeah, I do too. I think 6th and 7th round's perfect for Jalen Simpson.
And that's a guy I've been targeting for a long time. So that's another name that I would look at. What are give me some more sleepers that you like that are going to be in that 5, 6, 7 range? I mean, Tyke Smith, you like him at all? Like, who do you like?
I like him. Josh Proctor seems to be a guy that's on their radar, and I think that he kind of fits what they're looking for. On my Titans traits grading chart, if you will, he scores pretty evenly across the board to get you a 78.49, which, let me tell you, the highest grade is Ryan Watts, who gets a lot of benefit from the athletic testing at 87.96. So not a really great class of safeties, but a guy that I think that I'm not surprised that they are looking at him, that they have done a virtual meeting with him, because he seems like a guy that hits every check mark. Not elite at anything, but he's just kind of he's a jack of all trades across the board.
51 games played. He started 11 games for Ohio State the last couple of years. He's played in big moments. They've actually used him in the backfield some as well to pressure the quarterback. I think you're right. He's sort of like just an all-around solid player that never ends up as like a really high-end starting safety, but probably could be a third safety for a team for a long time and have a pretty good career in the NFL.
And really, your high-end safety at this point is Amani Hooker. So if he is the companion to Amani Hooker, that's a pretty good duo, in my opinion.
Yep, I agree. All right, corner, I think you don't like Wiggins. I'm with you on that. I could see any of the options in the first round, but not unless they trade back to like at least 13, if not further back. And even then, I'd rather be picking 24 if you're going to take a corner, because then you could take Kool-Aid or DeJean or somebody else that you really like in that range. So I don't know if you have anything to add. I don't like Arnold or Mitchell. I think they're both really good players, but I would not want them at 7, 9, 11, 13. I'd want them more in like the 18 to 25.
I'm in the minority. It's probably just me and Stoney and the Mitchell family. But I would be fine with Quinyon Mitchell at 7. But I know people think I'm crazy, but I think personally, I think Quinyon Mitchell is the best cornerback in the class.
I don't necessarily even argue with you on that, but the question is he?
It's just such a good, it's a need, but the chances that he could be best player available is a whole different story.
I think that's ultimately what I struggle with. Is I have no problem with saying he's the best corner in the draft. The question is it a position of need that's clearly more than the other ones, and is he best available at 7? I think he's more like, again, 13 earliest for me, 11 maybe. Okay, so guys in the second round, we've already talked about these guys before, so we don't need to kind of spend too much time on if Kool-Aid McKinstry's available at 38. That's maybe a guy that they take, even though he's a fourth corner. They don't have a lot of depth at that position. There's a big drop-off after their top 3. I think corner's probably higher on their board based on their visits than we think, but all of those names, I think they're looking at more like if they get a trade back, take your tackle at 11 or 13, and then you get that extra second round pick, and that extra second round pick is where they take a corner. So who do you like in that, let's say 50-ish range for the team?
I mean, I don't know where TJ Tampa ranks, but he seems like the most under-discussed cornerback of this entire draft class. Nobody's talking about TJ Tampa. He's got great size. He's got good athleticism on tape, and he has the production you're looking for. I'm very surprised not many people are talking about TJ Tampa, and maybe other fan bases or analysts are, but I'm not hearing any talk about TJ Tampa, and he does to me seem like a guy that you could invest in that can play on the outside and really provide you a lot of flexibility, because ultimately I think that's what you're looking at. You're looking for a guy that can either split time inside and outside, or you're looking for an outside guy. I don't think you're looking for a Mike Sandstrel. I don't think you're looking for and really Mike Sandstrel's production is not that good.
He's just he's a good football player.
Yeah, but I mean, at some point to be a good football player, you actually have to start collecting something.
He does not fit the Titans in almost any way. So I don't. He's one of those guys that I wish.
Lassiter is just not for me.
Rakestraw.
Slow. Yeah, I don't like Rakestraw. He doesn't. I don't like his build. I would like, to me, where we get at in these second round corners is that I can find probably someone just as good in the fourth round. I'm willing to take that risk. That's kind of where I'm at.
So if you look at Jarvis Brownlee, who they've met with out of Louisville, Max Melton out of Rutgers, if you look at, I don't know if Chris Abrams-Drain would count as this guy as well. What we're talking about,
I like him.
If you mention all of those guys, I like Cam Hart out of Notre Dame. I like Andru Phillips out of Kentucky. If you put all those guys together, a few of those guys are going to be available at 106. And what you're saying is the gap between those options at 106 and what you're taking at 38, with the trade-off of what you're not getting at 38, which could be a pass rusher or a wide receiver or offensive lineman even. That's the drop off. Like, there's not a big drop off in corner from, let's say, pick 45 or 50 to pick 106. And that, I completely agree. I think they should be targeting safety or corner at 106, unless they love a middle linebacker or something like that. I think that first pick when they come back is, to me, screams defensive back.
Glory Day Sports saying Andru Phillips certainly doesn't get enough love, and I just saw 2 people say that he's going to sneak in the first round.
What?
So Dane Brugler, Nate Tice.
Okay, all right.
They think that he's going to sneak into the first round. So he's getting a lot of love, and that's too much love. Now they've overcorrected.
but it reaffirms my like of the prospect, I feel like. So.
Yeah. But like, did you even say Kyrie Jackson?
I did
Chef
not.
Ren brings him up there. I mean, if you're asking me whether I would like to have, in no matter the pick in the second round, Ennis Rakestraw in the second round or Chris Abrams-Drain and their teammates in the fourth, I'm taking Chris Abrams-Drain.
I agree.
If you're asking me whether I'd like Kamari Lassiter in the second round or on day 3, Kyrie Jackson, Cam Hart, I'm taking those guys. Like, I'm taking guys that have production, that can play man coverage and have athleticism. I think athleticism is the biggest key component to what you need in a cornerback. And then you go to physical traits, right? You go athleticism, then you go to your physical traits. Is he inside or outside? Okay, if he checks athleticism box, checks the physical box, and you go over to on the field, can he play man? What does his press coverage look like? How many reps does he have? What can he do? That's where I'm at. That's how I look at cornerbacks.
Max Melton, Jarvis Brownlee available at 106? Or do you think they've moved up boards too fast?
Probably moved up boards too fast. But, man, I sure would love me some Max Melton. Let me tell you something. I would be over the moon to have Max Melton at 106.
I agree. And you said TJ Tampa hasn't gotten a lot of love. I agree. I've seen him, third round a lot. And now I think he's going to move up. I think he's going to be more of like a late second round pick. So I don't think he's even close to being available in the fourth. But things have changed in this. Corner changes faster than you realize. These guys move up and down real fast. And so I think there will be, the key is if you're playing the draft like a game, it's can you get a good corner at 106? And I think the answer is yes. And I was texting with a draft analyst, and we've talked a lot about wide receivers, right? I was texting with somebody who said that if the Titans don't take a wide receiver at 7, he doesn't think they should take one because there's not any the depth. He thinks the depth drops off after like midway through the second, third round, like after about a top 100-ish, give or take, maybe earlier. And he goes, I don't really. There are guys that you've mentioned. Actually, he mentioned some names that you like. The Washingtons. Either of the two Washingtons.
One of them will be on day 3. Like, that's the thing, right, is that there's only so many players that can go in that top pick. And there's surprises, right? There's always surprises in that top 100 pick. That's why nobody ever has a perfect 100 big board. So there's always surprises. There's about 20 surprises in the top 100, which means that there's going to be 20 players that are going to be available. And then that's going to get pushed down. Like, to me, this idea that I don't think that there's going to be, this could be a bold take. I don't think there's going to be 25 wide receivers gone from day 1 through day 3.
25 total.
25 total. I think there will be less than 25 total right now.
Wow, that's
just off the top of the head.
Oh, I think
I don't think there's going to be that many.
I think you could have 20 taken in the first 3 rounds. But
yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't think there's going to be 25 taken in the first 2 days.
Oh, did you say okay? Maybe I thought you said the whole round.
Maybe I misspoke, but that's what I meant. First,
I thought you said the whole draft. No. I think there's a drop off in depth around the top 20 of receivers, and I think the drop off happens around pick 100. And that anything I think there are maybe 2 or 3 names that are worth being.
Yeah, remember how far Hyatt and Tillman dropped? You know, they dropped a lot, and they were dropped into the 3rd round. Puka Nacua was there on day 3. There's always day 3 prospects that shouldn't be there that are always going to be there, and there's always day 3 prospects that go in day 2. That's just kind of how it goes in the draft. So I'm not one of those people that's like, well, that guy will never be there. Is it improbable? Maybe.
Stevie says, Luke, I'm assuming you're saying Luke McCaffrey. Is that what you meant if we're talking wide receivers late in the draft, or you meant J.J. McCarthy early, or am I missing something? The reason I brought that up I know we're talking corners. The reason I brought that up is that I think you can comfortably target a corner or safety, a defensive back at 106, and feel like you're going to get somebody pretty good that you really like that can be a contributing player at that position. If you are targeting wide receiver at 106 or later, I don't think you can guarantee yourself anything.
It's more of I agree. I think wide receiver is a more high risk proposition, whereas cornerback feels a lot safer.
Yep, I agree. So again, are we back to offensive tackle, pass rusher, wide receiver as 2 of the 3 in the first 2 picks? Probably, which is why you need to trade back. So there are corner sleepers and some safety picks for you guys to consider, some names to know, as well as a healthy conversation about Will Levis. All right, draft party charity event on Thursday and Friday next week. That's right, it is next week. Brought to you by Sinkers Beverages at the Track 1 location in Wedgwood, Houston. All you can eat, all you can drink on Thursday night with Edley's Barbecue, a live show after the Titans pick, and of course Stoney Keeley, which is worth the price of admission. And then on Friday, we've got a real fancy, swanky get-together where we're going to sit down and have a great time watching those two rounds on rounds 2 and 3. Lachlan table, 3-course meal, bourbon flight, 5 different bourbons you're going to get to taste. It's totally going to be a ton of fun. So come on out and have a good time. Otherwise, stackingtheinbox.com, football and other F words. You got the Music City Audible, the Hot Read podcast. You got all the other great shows across the 440 Sports Network. We do appreciate you guys for hanging out. For Zach, at FWordsPod, of course, on twitter.com, because that's still technically the URL. You can get to me at Braden Gall. Please rate, review, subscribe, share the show, like it, retweet it, repost it, share it. Help us grow this audience. You guys have been responding in a big way on YouTube, and so we appreciate you guys for doing that. So other than that, Zach, I think we're good. We'll talk to you guys on Thursday. Have a great week, everybody. Talk to you then.